Welcome to the NAIFA webinar series, providing you with timely information and training each month on topics of interest. This is Brendan Burnett, Director, Professional Development and Education Programs. This month we are presenting Disability Insurance, a NAIFA member's story. With me today is Monique Gaskins. Monique joined the financial services industry in 2003. Throughout her career, she has worked for 4 major insurance companies. In 2011, Monique started her own practice where she focuses on protecting her clients' ability to earn an income. She currently holds a life and health license in Virginia and Maryland. Monique has focused her practice on working with families in the disability and long-term care insurance markets. This is a very personal area of interest as Monique's mother lost her lengthy battle with breast cancer in 2012 at the age of 55. Few can be emotionally prepared for such an ordeal, but Monique's goal is to ensure that her clients are financially prepared for life's most serious challenges. Monique currently serves as president of NAIFA Northern Virginia and as membership chair on the national board of the National African American Insurance Association. She is a founding board member and immediate past president of the NCCM chapter of NAIFA and a board member of the Northern Virginia chapter of the National Association of Health Underwriters. According to Life Happens, 1 in 4 of today's 20-year-olds will become disabled at some point during their career. And as we are approaching Disability Insurance Awareness Month in May, today's presentation is quite timely. I should add that, Monique, you delivered a presentation similar to today's to the NAIFA National Office staff about a month ago, and that was tremendous success. So today we are thrilled to have you back in the NAIFA National Office, and we have a bit of a reprise that we're now presenting to the NAIFA members. And so today you'll be sharing your real-life story, the importance of protecting clients' most valuable asset, how to paint a clear picture by first understanding the need, and also you'll be delivering some sales ideas designed to help our members transition from a life and P&C conversation to a DI conversation. So let's begin. Monique, please start by telling us how you became involved with disability insurance.
Well, just a little bit more about my background. I spent over 10 years working, like you said, at 4 major insurance companies, working with brokers and insurance agents in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, specifically in the area of disability insurance. I've taught trainings, continuing education classes, and I've done joint work. So primarily my clients, prior to going out independent, were insurance agents and brokers. Those were my clients. So that gives you a little background as we start to get more into the disability topic, where I'm coming from. I'll start off with my real-life story. First, I also want to thank you all for taking time to be on the call today for me to share with you my real-life story and some information that I hope you will find very helpful to you all in your practice. In March of 2011, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer for the 2nd time. This time, her breast cancer had come back and it had metastasized, so it had come back in her abdominal area. This was early March, and so we began to start treatment by the beginning of April. By the end of April, Mom was no longer able to go to work. Throughout the month, she had gone for a day here, half a day there, but it got to the point where she was taking more and more time off. So by the end of April, she was no longer going to work. Over the next few weeks, we continued to have treatment in Virginia here, and by the end of a couple of more cycles, we found that the treatment had not been working. Mom had heard several advertisements about a facility in Philadelphia, and so we talked, her and my dad and I, and we thought that we would try that facility. We went up for an evaluation, and that weekend, they ran a whole bunch of tests and gave her the opportunity to start treatment that Monday. So we made the decision to go and move forward with that. Here we're about July time frame now. So that summer, we would go up weekly or bi-weekly for chemo, lab work. Some days she would not be to the best of her physical health, so we would end up staying maybe 1 or 2 extra days just because she would be too weak to travel back home. We did that again throughout the summer. By the fall, those 1 or 2 days turned to 1 week, 2 weeks, even 6 weeks we would spend at the treatment center while Mom would be undergoing chemo and tests. At this point, the smaller tumors they were able to reduce, but this one large tumor in her stomach they weren't able to successfully treat. So by late fall, my mom was no longer able to eat. They had put in a feeding tube, which they would then send her home with, and daily I would be there by her side. I had to hook up her nutrition bag every day, provide her with IV fluids every day. I lived in the same building, which was close, but I actually stayed at my parents' house during that time. And being an only child, Mom only wanted me to handle the IV and just taking care of her. We did have a person that would come in once a week to maybe do some exercises with her, take some lab work, but they weren't changing the IVs and things of that nature. They felt that maybe once a week was enough for a bath, but of course, we made sure that that wasn't the case in our household. But throughout this period, as you can see, things progressively went down, and about almost a year to the date that Mom was diagnosed the second time, she passed peacefully at home with my dad and I and her sister. As you can see, that's a short version of it, but there was a lot of things going on during that time with her illness, and taking turns this way and taking turns that way, and feeding tubes and Christmas, which we didn't miss that year. And the reason that Christmas still stayed the same, and New Year's, and anything else that my mom might want to do, was because Mom had disability insurance at work. Her company was one of the 30% of companies in America that have some type of disability program in place for their employees. So when we were at Cancer Treatment Center of America, those days, Mom was asking me to pull up her bank account and saying, okay, let's go through and let's pay my bills. And she was a check writer, so we would write out the checks for her various bills because the income was still coming in. And then once, after 3 months, when she started to receive the disability checks, we would call home, and Dad would check the mail and deposit them in the account, and we would continue to write her bills. There was a plan there in place so that with all that was going on, money did not have to be a concern for us. So I thank God for that, and I'm just so glad once again that her company had something in place. It's Disability Awareness Month coming up, and that's why we wanted to get a head start and get you all thinking about that. But I just want to add one additional piece to the story. For that past 6 months leading up to Mom passing and me being her caregiver, I wasn't able to work because pretty much round the clock I was with my mom and taking care of my mom. And then even after she passed, you can imagine it was very hard for me to get back to work. But again, her employer had in place life insurance, and Mom had bought additional life insurance. And again, that was a blessing for myself, who in that 6 months had basically depleted most of my savings. So this is one of the good stories, so to speak. It didn't have a happy ending as far as my mom, but financially we didn't have to worry about money during the time, and then after the time I didn't have to worry about financial and where the money was going to come from. So just wanted to share that story with you all. I hope that it will put you in mind and think about your own story. I think that's very important that we have a story to share, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the message. So as we begin the presentation today, as I told you, I've worked with the brokerage community for over 10 plus years, and I'll probably use the word broker and agent interchangeably. It means the same thing to me. But I found that a lot of agents have said that they're not talking about disability insurance because they find it confusing. And what I seem to notice in my experience is that agents get so caught up and the moving parts and the riders and the optional features. It's not complicated. What we need to do a better job of is just painting a clear picture. And so how do we do that? Well, we can start by asking the right questions. You see, most people can't imagine themselves being disabled. So you have to use words like too sick or hurt to work. So we'll start this conversation with, what would you do if you were too sick or hurt to work? And then you pause. Next, you could go into, where would the money come from? These are questions that you can start off with to open up the conversation. Now, we haven't talked about product. We're just getting them to think so that then later we can maybe look into alternatives to fill the need. Now, when you ask these questions, you're going to hear a number of responses from your clients. Some of the most common ones that I've seen in my years are, I'll borrow the money from family. I don't know how interested a family member would be in letting someone in their family borrow money if they don't have a job at the time. Another response that we often get is, I'll take money from my 401k. Not a good idea at all. You know, there's penalties related to that. There's taxes related to that. Another common objection, well, I'll get a loan. Well, in some cases, it's hard enough to get a loan when we're working. But could you imagine if you're too sick or hurt to work, and then you go to the bank and you want a loan? So we have to be prepared for some of those objections. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the last piece that I want to add to that is, with those objections, this is when I would then go into a personal story. And if you don't have one, borrow one. I have one of my colleagues that is always telling a story about another client or another agent's client. Always have a story. And then if they have a personal experience that you're aware of, get them to start talking about that experience. How did that make you feel? How did they feel? Those are questions that generate emotion. And then when people are motivated in that way, then they'll start to take action. So lastly, what I wanted to add to that was, you all must own the product. If your client asked you, do you have the same plan, or did you add this particular rider, you must be able to say yes. So if you've never sold disability insurance before, be your first DI client. Go through the underwriting process yourself. Underwriting has always been another reason that agents say that they don't sell disability insurance. They say, the underwriting process is too long or too hard. Well, it's not, but again, you must paint a clear picture. Underwriting is very different for disability versus life underwriting. As they say, what won't kill you can disable you. So I would recommend you submitting a cover letter with an app so that you can paint a clear picture for the underwriter if necessary. It can truly make all the difference. Now, here's another approach that I'd like to take. This is something that I normally suggest that will help start the conversation as well. You ask the client, what do you think is your most important asset? Despite what the client may think their most important asset is, their ability to earn an income is truly their most important asset. Ask your client, what would you do if you were too sick or hurt to work? Where would the money come from? Again, it's a follow-up, reiterating where we started. Now, as we mentioned a little bit before, I don't want to get too technical, but I think that it's very important that we go into the product a little bit, go into the design, so that you see that it doesn't have to be that scary. A lot of times people think, how do I design the product? What are the most important riders? So I'm going to tell you how I would design the product and what features or riders I feel are most important. So when I use the word optional features, I'm also that just basically is another word that I use for riders, okay? So when we're looking at the product, first we want to take a look at the client. So right now I have in mind that I'm working with, let's say, a white-collar client, someone who's not doing any physical work. They're probably behind a desk, okay? So the first thing we would look at with the product is the definition. And sometimes, you know, with each company, they have different definitions of disability, but for a typical white-collar employee, I'm going to look for a definition that if they're unable to perform the material and substantial duties of their regular occupation, it would protect them, and they would not be forced to go back to work. So this is a very strong definition for disability, that they will not be forced to go back to work if they're unable to do the duties of their regular occupation. Okay? So now we can enhance this particular definition by putting on some additional features, which you all may have heard them referred to as ONOC or True ONOC or Your OC. Depending on the carrier, they would classify them in one of those three categories. And basically, this now expands the definition of disability. Now, if they're unable to perform their job, they could work in another occupation and still receive their full benefit. So now this is a definitely much nicer definition of disability. So once we've gotten past the definition, then we have to look at calculating the benefit amount. And the benefit amount is basically calculated based on your client's income. So typically, a disability based on what we have is called issue and participation limits. And so basically, this tells you how much, based on your client's income, what they would qualify per month. So disability is a monthly benefit. So it's designed to get the client up to a 60% replacement. But as the client starts to make over $100,000 a year, this doesn't always work out to be a 60% replacement. But that's typically what it's designed to cover 60% of their income. So now we've taken a look at the benefit amount for this particular client. Next, we can look at, say, the benefit period. Now, I'm always in favor of a benefit period to age 65. I feel as though a 2-year or 5-year or 10-year, if you're disabled 2 years, then most likely you're going to be disabled longer. Same with 5 and same with 10. So I always like to look into an age 65 benefit period. So as I mentioned, 2, 10, 5, 65, and 67. Those are typically your options. And in some cases, depending on their occupation, they may be limited to a lesser benefit period, a 5-year or 10-year. So the next piece after that I would look at is some of the optional features or riders to the policy. Now, the most important one to me is residual disability rider. You might have heard it called partial disability rider. That would be another name for it. And the reason why this is so important is because if a person was not deemed totally disabled by their physician and they went back to work part-time, they would not receive their disability benefit. But if they have this rider, they would continue to receive a portion of their benefit based on their loss of income. So if they have the partial disability rider and they go back to work, they'll receive a portion of their disability benefit based on their loss of income. If they do not have this rider and they go back 1 day a week, their disability benefit will be cut off. So this is very, very, very important to me. I would not even sell a disability policy without this rider. I think it's so very important because nowadays people want to go back to work. They may get bored sitting at home, and so if they can do something, most people will try to do something. The next rider, which cost of living inflation rider, I think that's very important. $800 a month today is not going to be the same 20 years from now. With the cost of living rider, once the person is out on claim, the benefit amount would increase by whatever percentage the company, typically it's 3 or 4% depending on the company, and that could be simple or compound. But again, this benefit amount would increase once the person is out on claim. Okay. The next rider, which I always put on a policy, is the catastrophic rider. The catastrophic rider, also known as CAT in the industry, is a rider that's fairly inexpensive, but it provides an additional benefit on top of the base if the client is what's called catastrophically disabled. And what does that mean? Well, if they've lost 2 activities of daily living, either sight in both eyes, hearing in both ears, speech, Alzheimer's, dementia, if they lose the use of their hand or a hand and foot combination on one side, for example with paralysis, then this would trigger this particular benefit amount. And typically with most carriers you can get an additional $8,000 per month on top of the base benefit if you're catastrophically disabled. Now, with a young person, it gets me to, it's not a long-term care conversation. With someone who's maybe 45 and older, this gives me the opportunity to then transition and talk to them about a standalone long-term care policy. So for someone that's younger, I'll go ahead and put on the catastrophic rider because most likely they don't want to talk to me about long-term care right now because, of course, they can't imagine themselves needing long-term care. So, but it's a good way to at least have that on the policy. But again, for someone who's maybe 45 years or older, it's a good transition to start talking about long-term care since, you know, 2 activities of daily living is a trigger for long-term care, but also a trigger for this particular rider. So, great opportunity to cross-sell there. Last but not least, and again, there's a number of riders, but these are just, you know, the ones that I feel are most important to the policy. The future increase option rider, you might have heard it called the guaranteed insurability option rider. Basically, this one protects future income, so therefore, they will never have to go through medical underwriting again. They would have to show financials. It would be a short app, but they would be able to purchase additional monthly benefits at a future date, again, without having to go through medical underwriting. So those are the riders that I would put on the plan, and so that's pretty much how my policy would look for my client. Now, again, that would change if we were looking at someone who was maybe in the blue-collar market, as all riders are not eligible for everyone. And then again, it may change because certain carriers have different riders than others. But for the most part, the ones that I discussed with you, you're going to find them in most disability companies that you would go to. So some of the target markets that I wanted to share with you, the physician and dental market is one of the markets that I have focused on a lot with my clients. Reason being that most companies, most of the major companies have what's called starting practice limits for these particular the medical and dental professionals. They also have programs for them when they're in residency. So they're not yet making an income, but they will go ahead and make an offer to them, provide coverage to them. They will go through medical underwriting, but they will offer coverage to them knowing that they're in professions where they're going to make a lot of money later on in life. So if you may have a local university near you that has a dental or a medical program, this would be a great program that you could take in and offer to their residents. And typically, someone like, you know, myself in your area would go in and basically assist you with that presentation. But that would be a great way to start with them while they're fresh in their career, and then you have a lifetime client because you've caught them on the beginning of their career. So that is one of the markets that I found for, you know, my practice as well as working with agents. You know, the white-collar market is much easier, of course, with underwriting, but note that there are a lot of carriers out there that specialize in, you know, different, so you have carriers that may have 2 products, one geared more towards the blue-collar market, one geared more towards the white-collar market. You also have carriers out there that will have graded, what we call graded products for people that may have, you know, health conditions or their background may not be squeaky clean. So there are a lot of options out there. There are a lot of disability carriers out there for your clients. One thing I wanted to throw in here as I was thinking as well as many of you belong to maybe a BNI or a networking group, or you may have a couple of people that you meet with for breakfast once a week or once a month. Some of the people that I think are good resources for you as it relates to disability insurance, and of course your other product lines, but business attorneys, CPAs, and then mortgage brokers and realtors, I think, are great resources for you as well. And I say that because as I get into the sales concepts that we're going to go into, when we think about someone in their home, and when you're sitting down with your clients and you say, well, if something happens to you, you want your family to be able to stay in this house. So we always look at it from a life insurance aspect. But what if the person doesn't die? What if they're too sick or hurt to work? Don't we still want them to stay in that house? I'm sure they want to. So we can start off maybe just saying, okay, your mortgage is $2,500 per month. We could look at a disability plan covering the mortgage, but then we could say, are there any other expenses that you'd like to have taken care of in the event that you're too sick or hurt to work? Well, I like my car note, and, I've been, saving for the kids' college. I won't be able to do that. I've got, this insurance with you. We don't want them to drop that. So, again, this is a conversation where we've gone from maybe just protecting that $2,500 to protecting other things, in their life, their livelihood, because we can put it in underwriting for any amount that we want. So if we're going to put it in underwriting, we might as well put it in there for the higher amount. So that's just a nice way to transition. And I said, working with mortgage brokers and realtors with opportunities, to do some cross-selling there, maybe some joint seminars. I know that years ago we had a realtor, and she would do an open house, and we would invite clients in and then talk to them about insurance, disability insurance. But that was an opportunity for us to bring a number of people to the house, and they would do the tour of the home, and then we would have a presentation with some food. So just an idea of some things that you can do with your partnership. The other piece is, if any of you are working in the P&C market, when you're sitting down and you're going over the coverages that you have with your client, so we have automobile insurance in place. Okay, great. So now we have your homeowner's insurance in place. Okay, great. Now we have your general liability for your business in place. Oh, paycheck. We don't have any insurance to protect your paycheck. What would happen if you were too sick or hurt to work? So that's how we could transition from basically doing an annual review. We could transition and talk about disability insurance, okay, or being too sick or hurt to work. And I keep using that over and over, too sick or hurt to work, because when you say disabled, I think that most people probably think wheelchair. They think a handicap symbol, and it's not. Because, how often do you see someone walking from a handicap parking space and you're like, oh, what's wrong with them? It's not always something that you can see. It's not always something where the person's in the wheelchair. So that's why I like to use the words too sick or hurt to work. Last sales idea that I like to use for you superstar life insurance agents out there, I would never sell a life insurance policy without waiver of premium, disability waiver of premium. So again, that's a nice transition. So now we're waiving the premiums on your life insurance policy in the event that you were too sick or hurt to work. What other items in your life would you like to have waived? So that's a nice transition there. So now we can take that a step further when we're doing the life insurance piece and talk about disability insurance there. So those are just a couple of ideas that I thought that I would share with you all. And then there's just so many others, and we'll probably get into some questions here shortly where I can, help you with some more ideas. But I just wanted to basically go over, just a few scenarios to kind of help you with what I've experienced and what I found to be most challenging with agents in the past.
Wonderful.
Another great resource I just want to mention is Life Happens. lifehappens.org. It's a free website. The material on there is all compliant approved material. With Disability Awareness Month coming up, you can go on there and they'll have videos with people telling real life stories. They'll have statistics. They'll have calculators, and they have this for life, disability, as well as long-term care. If you have a business client and you want to talk about disability insurance or some of the other product lines related to disability insurance in the business market, they have videos for all of that. So I truly think it's a great resource. I'm always taking the links and cutting them over to my Twitter and to my Facebook insurance page. So again, it's all compliance approved material as well, so you shouldn't get in trouble for using that. And as we started with, basically the reason why I'm here is we didn't want to wait for Disability Insurance Awareness Month. We wanted to start now so we can get the wheels turning in your head so that you can get started with putting your plan together so that you can start talking to your clients about disability insurance.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Monique. And I want to add that NAIFA is proud to be a supporter of Life Happens. Other than NAIFA, Life Happens is one of my favorite organizations. They've got some tremendously helpful client education brochures, and I'd also like to thank them for these quotes that you've been seeing today concerning the importance of disability insurance. As you can see, a person has a 3 in 10 chance of suffering a disabling illness or injury that would keep them out of work for 3 months or more during their career. And also this other stat, 1 in 4 of today's 20-year-olds will become disabled at some point during their career. And that's from the Social Security Administration. So some very important food for thought from Life Happens. We're going to go into questions now, but before we do that, or related to that, we also wanted you to have the opportunity, if we have any seasoned DI individuals out there participating in the webinar, if you could go ahead and type in the question box any target markets that you work with that you found to be especially helpful other than the medical and dental community. Don't give away any secrets, but if there's anything that you'd like to share through the question box, you can go ahead and type that in now, and we'll go ahead and take a few minutes. I have a few questions as you go ahead and get your questions going and also get your target market ideas going in the question box. You had mentioned a rider, Monique, that any DI policy must have, or you will not sell it. Could you repeat for our audience what that is to make sure they have that down?
Yes, that's the residual disability rider, also known as the partial disability rider.
Okay, wonderful. And you had also talked about a cover letter to help get through underwriting. So perhaps you could drill down a little bit on some of the features that you would normally want to see in such a cover letter.
Okay, absolutely. I think the cover letter is important because you know the person, you've seen the person, but on paper they might not look so squeaky clean. And so if the underwriter only has this application with all of these extra writing on those other pages, or which we fill out A and B and C and write all this information, that's all they have to go on. So if you can paint a picture for, yes, my client was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, yes, they're on all of these meds, but my client has not missed a day of work in over 10 years. My client is this, my client is that, they're an active member in their community. You know, you have to set a tone for the underwriter because all they see is what's in black and white. So I would definitely consider when you have someone that is, maybe on a few medications or maybe their background, like just for example, I had a client one time in years that their application came in from one of the brokers, and basically this person was on medication for anxiety, depression. However, it was situational. Well, the underwriter doesn't know that it's situational if you don't tell them that. This particular client's mother had been hit in a car accident, and out of the blue, of course, that's devastating to anyone. But when the underwriter sees it, you see that this person is on anxiety and depression. You don't see why. So that's why I said, well, cover letter comes into place. They can say, my client's mother passed three months ago. It was a tragic accident. The client has been on meds for the past and maybe seeing a counselor. Progress is great, client is getting better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, painting a clear picture, the cover letter would be great to do that.
Great, thank you, Monique. We're going to go ahead and move on to the questions now. And our first question, on average, how much would you say that a disability policy costs? And I'm sure that agents are asked this all the time. How would you respond to that question?
Well, the answer to that question, and there actually is an answer, 2 to 4% of their income. 2 to 4% of their income is what the annual premium will be for their disability policy. It only may stretch to 5% in the event that the person may be rated up. Just like with life insurance, we can rate up disability insurance, add additional premium to it. So, but 2 to 4% of the income, you'll find when you run your quotes that it will fit right in that range.
Thank you. Our next question, if an agent has a client that may have had a rather bumpy medical history several years ago, perhaps even cancer at one point in the past, would that be an automatic decline?
Absolutely not. Basically, what the underwriter would want to know is what type of cancer the client had, which stage the cancer was at, how long ago since it's been last treated, and have they had any flare-ups or any problems as a result of it. So typically 5 years since the last treatment is pretty good to go. Depending on the stage of the cancer, maybe a little bit longer, but typically in some cases it can be less, maybe 2 to 3 years, but the golden rule typically 5 years or more. 5 years, at least 5 years has passed, and we'd be able to look at it.
And we do have another question. What if their client can get disability coverage through an association contract? How would you get the client to give you the business? Is that possible? How do the association contracts compare? Wow, a lot of questions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yes. And that's a very good question. I've dealt with that a lot. I've read every association contract out there. And what I found that is if you do that as well, you'll see some of the hang-ups. They have a limited benefit period. They might not give the best definition. They might not be allowed a lot of the optional features. And what I found now is a lot of the major carriers are giving American Medical Association members a 10% discount. So if the person happens to be in the medical field, then there are several carriers out there now that are giving a 10% discount, basically if they say that they're a member. But for the other professions, the CPA, the Bar Association, those contracts have, in my opinion, a traditional disability policy would be much better for the client for the reasons that I noted: the benefit period, having a strong definition, and not having access to the riders. So definitely you would be able to make the sale. It's just making the comparison, because you have a lot of pluses on your side versus the association contract and all that I've seen. And depending on the carrier that you're working with, the brokerage director there, they have a lot of competitive information, a lot of side-by-side comparisons, and that's what I used to distribute to my brokers. So I know that most of the major companies can get you side-by-side comparisons, so you're not, doing a lot of this research yourself. You'll know where the differences lie between the different products. Great question.
Great. We do have another question, and just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, you can do so by typing a question in the question box on the right side of your screen. On an owner's BOE, does the owner's age, for example, someone over age 65, come into play?
Yes, it does, because typically you can only get disability coverage up to age 65. So for business overhead, it would be very hard to find. There is one particular company out there who goes above and beyond, insures higher limits, as also older individuals. So people that maybe 65, 69 would be able to get coverage through this particular company. So there is a company. I don't want to put any particular companies out on the line, like I'm endorsing any over the other, but my contact information will get that out to you all, and then you feel free to email me directly, and I can get you that information.
Great. And that brings up an excellent point. We'll go ahead and we are recording this webinar, which will be uploaded to YouTube, and the link will be going out in an email within 2 business days, so you can access this presentation. And you will also be receiving an email sooner than that, which will provide you with Monique's contact information for any other questions concerning this. So you had spoken earlier in your presentation regarding the medical and the dental practices being a great DI market, but you want to get into that while they're younger. So what would be some first steps? Would you cold call a medical school, or what in your experience would be a good way to approach that?
Definitely, calling the medical schools is what I found the most. I mean, you have to be flexible, but calling the medical schools, I noticed that most of the local hospitals, a lot of times their emergency room department, those are contract employees. They're not hospital employees. We've gone into a lot of the hospitals here and done disability insurance on them. They are also, sometimes they all belong to an association, and so we've gone into some of those associations and been able to offer coverage. So I would look into those opportunities. While we're talking about starting practice limits as well, most companies also have them for attorneys, for CPAs, for optometrists. So those are just some other markets if you're in, if you're working with attorneys or if you're working with CPAs. Most major companies also have starting practice limits for those individuals as well. And as far as pre-approach letters and marketing materials, again, all of the major companies have kits or pre-approach letters or marketing materials that could be helpful for you in reaching out to these individuals.
Wonderful. Well, clearly this is a coverage that clients simply cannot afford not to have, and so we appreciate so much your time today, Monique, and informing us about disability income insurance. I want to once again thank Monique and thank all of our participants for participating in the webinar today. We have kind of a good problem to have today in that we're finishing a little early, so we're going to let you get back to your clients and get back to your businesses. But once again, look for email with Monique's contact information with any questions, and also an email notifying you of the web link where you can access the recorded presentation. So once again,
and just one thing,
yes,
for those that email me, I will also send you back a one-pager of the questions that you asked, that you'll need, the information that you'll need in order to get a quote. So that will be very helpful in getting the appropriate information so that you can obtain a quote. So I will send you what I've sent out to agents and brokers that I work with, and it's basically that for it gets all the questions that you'll need to get a good quote.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and this concludes the webinar. Have a great day.